I still remember the moment that confused me the most. My boyfriend was sitting across from me at dinner, smiling, nodding, asking about my day. Everything looked normal. But something felt different. It wasn't what he said. It was what he stopped saying. And somehow, I didn't notice it until it was almost too late. For years, I believed I understood relationships pretty well. I thought communication was simple. If something bothered someone, they would say it. If they needed support, they would ask. If they were unhappy, there would be obvious signs. At least, that's what made sense to me. Back then, I was dating Ryan. We had been together for almost 3 years. We lived in a small apartment near downtown. Nothing fancy. Just a normal life filled with work, grocery runs, late-night takeout, and weekend plans. The kind of relationship that feels comfortable, predictable, safe. Ryan was calm by nature. He wasn't the type to start arguments. He rarely complained. He worked hard, paid attention to details, and always seemed steady. In many ways, I considered that one of his best qualities. Whenever something stressful happened, he handled it. Whenever life became difficult, he adapted. I remember telling my friends how lucky I was. He's so easy to be with. At the time, I meant it as a compliment. Now I realize I didn't fully understand what I was seeing. One evening after work, I came home frustrated. A project had gone badly. My manager had criticized something I'd spent weeks preparing. I spent almost an hour talking about it. Ryan listened quietly. He asked questions. He reassured me. By the end of the conversation, I felt much better. Then I asked him how his day had been. "Fine," he said. That was it. Fine. I accepted the answer and moved on. What I didn't know was that his company had announced layoffs that morning. He had spent the entire day worrying about whether his position was safe. But he never mentioned it. Not because he didn't trust me. Not because he wanted to hide it. Simply because, in his mind, my stress seemed more important. At the time, I thought he was being strong. Later, I realized something else was happening. Something I had never really considered. Many men are taught from a young age that their value comes from what they provide, solve, protect, and endure. Not necessarily what they feel. Not necessarily what they need. I didn't understand that yet. So I kept interpreting silence as strength. Weeks passed. Then months. Nothing dramatic happened. No major arguments. No betrayal. No explosive moments. Just small things. Tiny changes. Ryan became quieter. Less expressive. Less enthusiastic. If I asked what was wrong, he'd smile and say he was tired. I believed him. Because technically, he wasn't lying. He was tired. Just not in the way I imagined. One Saturday morning, we were having coffee before heading out. I mentioned a problem I was dealing with. Again, he listened. Again, he helped. Again, he seemed completely focused on me. Then, for a brief second, I noticed something strange. He looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. The expression disappeared almost immediately. But for some reason, it stayed with me all day. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started replaying recent conversations. And something uncomfortable became clear. I knew almost everything about what was happening in my own mind. But I knew surprisingly little about what was happening in his. At first, I blamed him. Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't he open up? Why didn't he communicate better? Those questions felt reasonable. But another question slowly emerged. Had I really created space for him to do that? Or had I simply assumed he didn't need it? That thought bothered me a lot. A few days later, I decided to try something different. Instead of asking, "How was your day?" I asked, "What's been weighing on your mind lately?" The reaction surprised me. Ryan paused. Not for a second. For several seconds. As if no one had asked him that question in a very long time. Then he shrugged. Nothing. But this time, the answer felt different. Almost automatic. Like a reflex. The conversation moved on. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened. Over the following weeks, I paid closer attention. Not to what he said. To what he avoided saying. I noticed he rarely talked about fears. Rarely talked about pressure. Rarely talked about disappointments. Whenever challenges appeared, he immediately shifted into problem-solving mode. Almost as if emotions were obstacles to get through rather than experiences to share. One evening, everything finally clicked. We were driving home after visiting friends. The car was quiet. Then Ryan said something unexpected. "I feel like I'm always supposed to have answers." His voice was calm. Almost casual. But something about it felt important. I waited. He continued. "If I'm stressed, I should handle it. If I'm worried, I should figure it out. If something goes wrong, I should fix it." He stared at the road. "And if I can't?" For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he laughed softly. Not because anything was funny. Because the question itself felt unfamiliar. I remember feeling a strange mix of sadness and realization. Because suddenly, I could see something I had missed for years. Ryan wasn't emotionally distant. He was emotionally responsible for everyone around him. Including me. And somewhere along the way, he had learned that sharing his struggles felt like adding weight to someone else's shoulders. The hidden psychology wasn't that men don't have emotions. It was that many become experts at carrying them privately. That realization changed everything. Not overnight. But gradually. I started asking different questions. I stopped assuming silence meant everything was okay. I stopped treating emotional openness as something that should happen automatically. And perhaps most importantly, I stopped seeing vulnerability as a personality trait. I started seeing it as an environment. People open up when they feel safe. Not when they're told they should. Over time, Ryan shared more. Not because I convinced him. Because he stopped feeling responsible for protecting me from every difficult thought he had. And when he did open up, I learned things I never would have guessed. The pressure he felt about work. The fear of disappointing people. The constant internal calculation of whether he was doing enough. Whether he was successful enough. Reliable enough. Strong enough. Those worries existed beneath the surface the entire time. I simply hadn't seen them. Looking back, I think many relationship misunderstandings begin there. Not with bad intentions. Not with lack of love. With assumptions. We assume people experience the world the same way we do. We assume they communicate needs the same way we would. We assume silence means comfort. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes silence is adaptation. Sometimes silence is habit. Sometimes silence is years of believing certain feelings should remain hidden. One of the most powerful lessons I learned was that empathy isn't understanding someone's emotions. It's understanding that their emotional world may operate differently from yours. That shift changed how I viewed not only Ryan, but people in general. I became more curious. Less certain. Less quick to interpret behavior through my own perspective. Because human behavior often hides motivations we can't immediately see. The strongest person in a room may feel the most pressure. The calmest person may be carrying the most stress. The person who asks everyone if they're okay may secretly wish someone would ask them the same question. Those hidden truths rarely announce themselves. They exist quietly, waiting to be noticed. Years later, I still think about that dinner table. That moment when I mistook silence for certainty. When I assumed I understood someone simply because I knew their routines. The truth is, knowing someone's schedule isn't the same as knowing their mind. And loving someone isn't just about hearing what they say. It's also about noticing what they've stopped saying. The hidden psychology of men in relationships isn't complicated. It's human. Many men spend years believing their struggles are problems to solve rather than experiences to share. Many become so skilled at carrying emotional weight that even the people closest to them forget it's there. And sometimes, the greatest act of empathy isn't offering advice. It's creating a space where someone no longer feels obligated to be strong every second of the day. Now, whenever I think about relationships, I return to one simple realization. People are often fighting silent battles behind ordinary conversations. The question is never whether those battles exist. The question is whether we're paying enough attention to see them. And how many people in our lives are waiting for someone to notice what they've never learned how to say.